My name is Harper, I'm 23 years old and I live in Seattle. The announcer's voice boomed, Harper Evans, summa cum laude. My heart wasn't just pounding, it felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. I forced a smile onto my face and started the long walk across the stage. My eyes immediately scanned the front row right where they were supposed to be. I saw the little reserved signs. Evans, 8 seats, my father, my mother. My perfect older sister Elise, my baby brother Ryan, my aunts and uncles, 8 seats, all perfectly, horribly empty. Around me, the stadium was a wall of sound. That's my daughter, we love you, Chris. Families were screaming, crying, holding up signs. People were blowing air horns. I searched for one familiar face, just one, nothing, no one waved, no one smiled, no one was there for me. There were just 8 empty chairs staring back at me, a silent, public judgment. A single, quiet laugh escaped my lips. It sounded bitter even to me. I took the diploma from the dean, I shook his hand, and I kept walking. I didn't look back, but before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment, where are you watching from? In my family, everyone had a job. My older sister Elise had the most important one, being brilliant. My younger brother Ryan had the second most important, being the baby. My parents' job was to applaud Elise and protect Ryan. My job was to be the audience. I was born to fill the gaps. I was the one who was supposed to be quiet, to be easy, to not need anything. I was the one who learned to shrink myself so the others had more room. When I was 10, Elise had a major science project, a model of a biosphere. She was supposed to build a self-contained world in a glass tank. She read the first chapter of the textbook, got bored, and went to her friend's house. Elise, this is due on Monday, my mother would say, wringing her hands. I'm too stressed, Elise would cry. I have too much pressure on me, so I did it. I read the textbook. I went to the store and bought the gravel, the charcoal, and the soil. I found the right plants. I spent all weekend with my hands in the dirt, carefully placing the moss, misting the glass, and sealing the top. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Elise turned it in. She got an A+. At dinner, my father raised his glass. To Elise, a brilliant botanist in the making. Elise beamed. It was actually really easy, she said. I sat there, my fingernails still black with soil. I opened my mouth to say something. I wanted to say, I did that. I built that world. My mother saw my expression. She leaned over and whispered, Don't, Harper, don't be jealous. You should be proud of your sister. I learned to swallow my words. They tasted like dirt. When I was 16, I got my first job at a local bakery. I loved it. I loved the smell of the yeast. I loved the weight of the flour sacks. I loved waking up at 4 a.m. when the world was dark and quiet. I saved every single paycheck. I kept the money in a locked metal box under my bed. I was saving for a camera, a real one. I wanted to take pictures of things. I felt like if I could just take a picture of something, it would prove I was really there. I had saved almost $600. One night my father came home late. He looked gray and tired. He sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of bills. Is everything okay, Dad? I asked. He sighed, a big, heavy sound. Just a cash flow problem, Harper. The business, it's just a temporary dip. He looked at me and his eyes were sad, but they were also calculating. You're so responsible, Harper. You're my responsible one. I knew what he was going to ask before he said it. I heard you've been saving, he said. I just need a loan just to cover payroll. I'll pay you back, I promise. I went to my room. I unlocked the box. I took out the wads of 5s, 10s, and 20s. It felt like I was handing him my arm. Thank you, sweetie, he said, patting my hand. You're a lifesaver. I never saw that money again. A week later, he and my mother went on a long weekend spa retreat to de-stress. I found the brochure in the trash. Ryan got a new gaming system because he was feeling left out. I didn't get my camera. I didn't complain. That was the system. Elise got the praise. Ryan got the protection. I got to pay for it. Elise would get a B+ on a test and my parents would hire a private tutor for $100 an hour. We have to invest in her future, my father would say. Ryan would crash his car, a small dent in the bumper, and my father would buy him a newer, safer model the next day. He's just a boy. He's learning. I won a statewide baking competition. I had created a 3-layer lavender honey cake. It was complex and it was perfect. I brought home the blue ribbon and a small check for $200. I walked into the house and the ribbon was in my hand. Look, I said, holding it up. My dad glanced up from the TV. Oh, that's nice, Harper, very nice. Hey, can you grab me a soda? My mom was on the phone with Elise, who was at college. Yes, honey, of course, we can send more money. You need to focus on your studies, not worry about your car payment. I stuck the blue ribbon in a textbook. It's probably still there. I was the family ghost. I was the support structure. I was the quiet set of hands that cleaned up the mess, baked the birthday cakes no one remembered I made, and handed over my savings. I was raised to stay small. I was trained to be invisible. I was taught in 1,000 silent ways that my life was only valuable when it was being used to serve someone else. My achievements were background noise, my needs were inconveniences, and I was so tired of it. I knew I had to leave, I had to get out, or I would disappear completely. College was my escape. I applied for every scholarship. I wrote essays until my fingers cramped. I got a full ride to a state school 8 hours away. The day I left, my mother cried. It's so far, she said. Who will help me with Ryan? My father shook my hand. Don't get any crazy ideas, he said. Study something sensible. Elise didn't even come. She had a headache. I packed my 2 suitcases, got on the bus, and I didn't look back. I thought I had escaped. I thought I was free. I didn't realize, not yet, that they weren't done taking from me. My escape led me to a tiny, freezing studio apartment in Seattle. It was all I could afford after I graduated, a box on the 4th floor of a walk-up with rattling windows and pipes that groaned all night. I could smell my neighbors cooking through the walls. It was always cabbage. I had chosen real estate. My father wanted me to study something sensible, which to him meant being a teacher or a nurse. Something where I was still taking care of people, but I didn't want to take care of people anymore. I wanted to build things. I loved the idea of taking something broken and making it whole. I loved the idea of walls, of foundations, of roofs. I loved the idea of creating permanent, solid spaces that couldn't be ignored. I wanted to give people homes, maybe because I had never really felt like I had one. The reality, however, was cold. I worked for a small, cutthroat brokerage. I was the intern, the assistant, the one who got coffee and made copies. To make rent, I worked as a waitress at night. I lived on instant noodles and stale bagels from the office. I was always cold, always tired, and always running. I had one nice black blazer and one portfolio. The portfolio was cheap pleather and the zipper was already starting to stick. It held my dreams, my listings, my notes, my maps of the city. I was failing. I was 6 months in and hadn't closed a single deal. Clients looked at me, a 22-year-old girl, and they saw a child. They wanted a man in a power suit. They wanted someone who looked like my father. One night I lost a listing I had worked on for a month, a small condo. It was my one big shot. The client called me. We just feel more comfortable with Greg, he said. Greg was the senior agent who had been stealing my leads. I went home. I didn't even turn on the light. I just sat on my single mattress on the floor in the dark, in the cold. My blazer was still on. I was exhausted. I was so bone-tired I felt like I could just dissolve into the floor. I made the mistake. I thought just for a second that this time it would be different. I pulled out my phone. I needed to hear a voice. I called home. My dad picked up. Hello, he said. His voice was loud. The TV was on in the background. A game was on. Hey, Dad, it's me. Harper, how's Seattle? You still playing with those little houses? He always called them that. Little houses. It's hard, Dad. My voice cracked. I hated it. I hated that I sounded weak. I lost a listing today. It was a big one. I don't know if I can do this. There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. It was the I'm disappointed sigh. The you're an inconvenience sigh. I knew it well. Harper, I told you, he said, and his voice was sharp. I told you this was a bad idea. Real estate is for men. It's a numbers game. It's a Shark Tank. It's not for... He didn't have to finish the sentence. It's not for you. You were always better at the soft stuff, honey, he continued, his voice softening, which was somehow worse. Like that baking you used to do. Why don't you get a nice, simple job, be an administrative assistant? Something safe. I was crying now, silent, hot tears running down my face in the dark. He wasn't trying to help. He was trying to put me back in my box, the box I had just climbed out of. It's not an experiment, Dad, I whispered. It's my career. It's what I want to do. Yeah, well, want doesn't pay the bills, does it? He said. Listen, your brother just scored. I've got to go. You should really think about coming home. This little dream of yours is, well, it's just not practical. I just needed some support, I said, my voice so small. And I'm telling you, the supportive thing to do is to come home, he said. I can't talk about this all night. Your mother sends her love. Click, he hung up on me. He didn't say, you can do it. He didn't say, that's tough, but I believe in you. He didn't even say, I'm sorry. He just hung up. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. I stood up, full of a new, hot, shaking energy. It was rage. It was the rage of being dismissed. I grabbed my portfolio from the tiny table. I was going to throw it, too. I was going to throw everything. But as I grabbed it, the cheap material caught on the corner of the table. Rip! It tore, a long 6-inch gash down the side. My listings, my notes, my dreams, they all spilled out onto the dirty floor. I just stared at the mess. This was it. This was my early failure. A tiny, cold room, a broken portfolio, a father who thought I was a joke, a life that was spilling out onto the floor. I sank down onto the linoleum, which was so cold it hurt my knees. I cried. I cried for the girl who built the biosphere, and for the girl who lost her savings, and for the girl who was sitting on a dirty floor with a ripped-up portfolio. I cried for about 10 minutes, then I stopped. My dad's voice was in my head. For men, not practical. Click. I crawled over to my dresser. In the back of a drawer, I had a small, free sewing kit, the kind you get from a hotel. I took out the needle. I took out the black thread. My fingers were numb from the cold. It was hard to thread the needle. I had to do it 3 times. I sat on the floor. I picked up the portfolio. I gathered my papers. I put them back inside. And then I started to sew. I didn't know how to sew leather. My stitches were ugly. They were big and crooked and clumsy. The thread was thick. It was a scar. I pulled the thread so tight my fingers hurt, stitch after stitch. I wasn't just fixing a portfolio. I was stitching my life back together. Every pull of the thread was a promise. You will not fail. You will not go home. You will not be soft stuff. I sewed that portfolio shut. It was ugly. It was scarred, but it was stronger than it was before. I put it on the table. It was the symbol of the life I would have to build, not just without their help, but against their wishes. I would build it alone. I sat at my table until the sun came up, my hand still throbbing. I was exhausted. I was shaken, but I was more determined than I had ever been in my life. He thought I was a joke. I would show him. I would show them all. 4 years later, I was walking to the stadium. It was my graduation day. I hadn't just gotten a degree in business. I had finished at the top of my class. Summa cum laude. Those 4 years had been a blur. I'd kept my head down. I'd left that first awful brokerage and found a small, independent one run by a woman named Sarah. She saw my stitched-up portfolio and didn't laugh. She said, I like a girl who knows how to fix her own problems. She taught me the business. The real business? I worked for her during the day and took a full load of classes at night. I still lived in a small apartment. I still ate instant noodles, but now it felt different. It felt like a sacrifice, not a punishment. I hadn't been home in 4 years. The invitations for graduation had gone out 2 months ago. I'd sent 8, one for each of them: Mom, Dad, Elise, her husband, Ryan, my aunt, my uncle, the whole front row. The family group chat, which I usually kept muted, was full of vague promises. We're so excited, honey, Mom had texted. We've already booked our hotel. Can't wait to see you walk, Harp, Elise wrote. Even Ryan chimed in. Gonna be awesome. We're all so proud. I read the texts, and a small, stupid part of me, the part that still wanted the blue ribbon, the part that still wanted the A+, it started to hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment I had worked for, not just the degree but the proof they couldn't ignore. Summa cum laude, a speaker at the honors ceremony. I wasn't just playing with little houses anymore. I was a success. I believed them. I let myself believe them. That was my mistake. The morning of graduation, I woke up in my empty dorm room. I put on my cap and gown. I adjusted the honors cords. I looked at myself in the small mirror. I looked professional. I looked like someone they could be proud of. I texted the group chat. It starts at 10. I'm on my way to the stadium. Can't wait to see you guys. I'm in section 104. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. Oh, honey, the most awful thing happened. Ryan woke up with a terrible fever. We think it's the flu. We're at the hotel and he's just so sick. A knot formed in my stomach. Cold and heavy. Oh no, I texted back. Is he okay? Do you need a doctor? He'll be fine, she wrote, but we just can't risk bringing him to a crowded stadium, and your father and I can't leave him. We feel terrible. It meant all of them. What about Elise and her husband? I typed, my fingers feeling slow. I waited 1 minute. 2, another text, this time from Elise. Harp, I'm so sorry, our rental car just broke down on the freeway. We're stranded, we're waiting for a tow truck. I'm literally crying. I'm so upset. I'm going to miss this. I stared at the 2 messages, a sick brother, a broken down car. It was all so neat. It was all such a perfect, coordinated, sloppy lie. I knew Ryan wasn't sick. I had seen his Instagram story from the night before, a 2 a.m. picture of him and my uncle doing shots at a downtown bar. The picture was still live. I clicked on it. There he was, perfectly healthy, holding a beer. I knew Elise's car hadn't broken down. I could feel the lie. It was lazy. They weren't stranded. They just didn't come. They were in the same city. They were probably all at the hotel, sleeping off their hangovers. My graduation, my summa cum laude, my 4 years of work, it was an inconvenience. It was secondary to Ryan's hangover and Elise's desire to sleep in. I walked to the stadium alone. I found my seat with the other graduates. The sun was hot. The plastic chair was hard. I could hear families screaming for their kids. People were holding up signs. We love you, JESSICA. I felt nothing. I was completely, totally numb. Then they called my name. Harper Evans, summa cum laude. The announcer's voice boomed. My heart pounded. I stood up. I forced a smile. I started the long walk across the stage. My eyes went right to section 104, right to the front row. I saw the little reserved signs. Evans. 8 seats, 8 empty chairs. They stared at me, a perfect, silent row of my family's indifference. My father wasn't there to say I was wrong. My mother wasn't there to cry. Elise wasn't there to be proud. Ryan wasn't there at all. No one. They didn't forget. They didn't have an emergency. They just chose not to be there. It was an intentional absence. It was a public statement. You are not worth the effort. A single bitter laugh escaped my lips. I heard it even over the applause from the strangers. I took the diploma from the dean. I shook his hand. I kept walking. I walked off that stage and I didn't look back. I didn't check my phone. I didn't go to the reception. I just kept walking. I walked out of the stadium. I walked back to my empty dorm room. I took off the cap and gown. A new truth had settled into my bones. It was hard and it was cold, but it was solid. They will never show up for me. They will never be the family I want them to be. They will never see me. And that was the final straw. That was the day the last stupid, hopeful part of me finally died. That was the day I was truly free, because I finally understood. I am on my own. And I said to myself in the silence of that empty room, okay. So I will show up for myself. From now on, I am all I need. I packed my bags. I left the diploma on the desk. I didn't care about it. I only cared about one thing, getting to work. The 8 months after graduation were silent. I mean that literally. The first thing I did was change my phone number. I didn't tell them. I didn't block them. I didn't have a big, dramatic fight. I just disappeared. I cut the cord. I let go of the rope that I had been the only one holding. The silence was deafening at first. I kept checking my phone, expecting it to ring, expecting the angry "Where are you?" text. But there was nothing because they didn't have my number. And that, I realized, was because they had never called me, not really, not just to talk. The silence became a relief. It was a clean, empty space. It was a blank page, and I was ready to write. I went back to Sarah's brokerage. I'm done with school, I told her, walking into her office. I was wearing my one good blazer and I had my stitched-up portfolio in my hand. I'm ready to work full-time, more than full-time. Sarah looked at me. Where have you been for the last 3 days? Your graduation was Friday. I was walking, I said. Now I'm here, she smiled. Good, I saved you a desk and a mess. My rise wasn't glamorous, it wasn't a movie montage. It was just work. It was endless, grinding, relentless work. I was the first one in the office at 5 a.m. when the city was still dark. I was the last one to leave, often after midnight. I learned to drink coffee black. I learned to read zoning codes until my eyes blurred. I learned to negotiate with contractors who thought I was just a little girl. I showed up on site in a hard hat and steel-toed boots. The plumbing in Unit 3 billion is not up to code, I'd say. They'd argue. I'd show them the code. Fix it. I stopped being nice. I stopped trying to fill the gaps. I became direct. I became precise. I became the shark my father had warned me about. I saved every dollar. I lived in a tiny apartment, smaller than my first one. My diet was still terrible. I didn't buy clothes. I didn't go on vacation. Every single cent went back into the business. I was renovating buildings. I found a small 3-unit apartment building that was covered in graffiti and had been empty for a decade. The bank didn't want it. The city didn't want it. I bought it for almost nothing. I spent 3 months there. I wasn't just directing, I was working. I helped hang drywall. I learned to tile a bathroom. I painted walls until my arms felt like they would fall off. I sold it. I made a profit, a small one, but it was mine. I did it again and again. I calculated risks. I studied at night. My apartment was covered in blueprints and spreadsheets. My stitched portfolio sat on my desk like a religious object. I touched it before every big meeting. It reminded me of who I was. I was the girl who sewed her own life back together. I told my family nothing. I didn't call them on Christmas. I didn't send a card on my mother's birthday. Silence was safer than being ignored. Silence was cleaner than their lazy lies. Silence was my new armor. Then, 8 months after graduation, I found it. It was an old, derelict warehouse on the waterfront. It was hideous. It was rotting. The windows were all smashed. Everyone saw it as a teardown. I saw it as a penthouse. It was the biggest risk of my life. I had to leverage everything. I had to borrow from banks, from private lenders. I had to put my entire new, fragile company on the line. I was terrified. One night I was standing in the dark, empty warehouse. It was just me and the sound of the water. I was 2 days from closing and I was short on capital. I had a moment of pure, cold panic. My hand went to my phone. I could call my father. I could beg. His voice echoed in my head. For men, click. I put the phone down. Show up for yourself, Harper, I whispered into the darkness. I found the money. I found a new investor by calling 100 names. I found a way. The renovation was a war. For 6 months, I worked 20-hour days. Every pipe burst. Every permit was delayed. Every contractor tried to cheat me. I didn't break. I didn't bend. I just worked. The day it was finished, I walked into the penthouse. My penthouse. I had built it for myself. The walls were all glass. The floors were warm marble. The kitchen was a masterpiece of steel and stone. The view was the entire city, the entire Seattle skyline glittering like a box of jewels. I had been raised to stay small and now I owned the sky. I sat on the floor in the middle of that vast, empty living room and I watched the sun come up. A week later, Seattle Architecture magazine ran the story. The $5 million jewel of the waterfront, the headline read. A mystery developer transforms a ruin into a masterpiece. There was a picture. It wasn't of me. It was of the penthouse at dusk, glowing. The world saw my work. I was drinking coffee in my new kitchen, staring at the Puget Sound when my new phone buzzed. I had given my new number to the magazine for a quote. I hadn't thought about the consequences. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. It was Elise. Wow, is this you? Linked to the article. I stared at the text. My hand was perfectly steady. A minute later, another text. My mother, Harper, honey. Why didn't you tell us? This is amazing. We're so proud. Call me. Another, Ryan. Holy crap, Harper, you're rich. That's sick. I watched the texts pile up. Amazing, proud, rich. Then the one I was waiting for, the one I knew would come. My father, Harper, call me. We need to talk. Family dinner at our house, 6 p.m. on Sunday. It's an important discussion. Don't be late. I read his message. No apology for graduation, no congratulations. No, I was wrong. Just a summons, a command. I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't love. It wasn't pride. It was a transaction. They hadn't seen me. They had seen the headline. They had seen the $5 million part. They only call when they need something. I looked at his text for a long time. The silence had been so peaceful. Now they were trying to break it. I typed out a reply. I'll be there. But I wasn't coming as their daughter. I wasn't coming as the gap filler. I was coming as a developer, and I packed a bag. I made sure to bring my old, stitched-up black portfolio. My phone sat on the cool marble of my kitchen counter. It had been buzzing for 10 minutes straight. First, Elise, wow, is this you? Linked to the article. I looked at the text. Wow, it wasn't congratulations. It was just shock, disbelief that the family ghost could do something so visible. Then my mother, Harper, honey. Why didn't you tell us? This is amazing. We're so proud. Call me. My finger hovered over the message. Why didn't you tell us? Because you didn't ask, because you weren't there, because you taught me that my achievements were an inconvenience. We're so proud, that one almost made me laugh. Proud of what? The $5 million or me? I knew the answer then. Ryan, holy crap Harper, you're rich, that's sick. Ryan, at least, was honest. He didn't bother with proud. He just saw the money, it was clean, simple. He saw a number and he was impressed. I hadn't replied to any of them. I was just drinking my coffee, watching the ferries move across the Sound. The silence of the last 8 months had been the most productive time of my life. Now that silence was broken. The Evans family was back, and then the final text, the one I was waiting for, my father. Harper, call me, we need to talk. Family dinner at our house, 6 p.m. on Sunday. It's an important discussion, don't be late. I read the message 5 times. Harper, not Harp, not honey, just my name, a summons. Call me, not I'd love to hear from you. A command, we need to talk, not we want to celebrate you. A problem, family dinner. The old, familiar trap. It's an important discussion. The same words he used when he was going to tell Elise she was getting a new car, or Ryan he was being sent to a summer camp to fix his grades. It was a business meeting disguised as a family meal. Don't be late. The final twist of the knife, a reminder of who was in charge. I stared at the words that weren't there. There was no congratulations. There was no I saw the article, I'm so proud of you. There was no I'm sorry. There was no we made a mistake. There was no how did you do this. There was just a command. 8 months. 8 months of silence. Not one of them had tried to find my new number. Not one of them had sent a letter. Not one of them had worried if I was alive or dead. But Seattle Architecture magazine, they found me just fine. And that magazine article was a flare. It was a signal. It said, the resource is here. I knew exactly what this was. This was not love. This was not pride. This was not a family reaching out to a long-lost daughter. This was a transaction. My father's business had been struggling for years. I knew his dips. I knew his cash flow problems. He was a small-time developer in a big-time city. He built duplexes. He renovated strip malls. He was always in debt, always robbing Peter to pay Paul. He was the man who took $600 from his teenage daughter's bakery job, and that daughter had just been publicly valued at $5 million. I was no longer Harper who plays with little houses. I was Harper who can solve our problems. The dinner was on Sunday. This was Saturday morning. They were giving me a day and a half to think about it, to let the pressure build. To let the old, familiar guilt creep in. The old Harper would have been a wreck. She would have been anxious. She would have been desperate for the approval. She would have been planning her apology. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was just so busy. I looked around my kitchen. The steel, the glass, the stone. I had built this. I had built it out of their silence. I had built it with the ugly, stitched-up portfolio that was sitting in my new home office. I was not the old Harper. I spent the rest of Saturday working. I tried to focus on a new project, a commercial building in Belltown, but their texts were a distraction, an itch. I finally gave in. I opened my laptop. I didn't search for them on social media. I searched for them on the public county records. I looked up Evans Development LLC. It was all there, a lease pendants, a notice of default, 2 liens from contractors. My father wasn't just in a dip. He was drowning. He had leveraged everything on one last big project, a redevelopment plan for a whole city block. It was too big for him. He was over-leveraged. He was out of money. The banks were calling, and then, like a miracle from heaven, his invisible daughter appeared in a magazine wrapped in glass and steel and holding a $5 million price tag. An important discussion. I finally understood. He wasn't just inviting me to dinner, he was inviting me to a pitch. He was going to ask me to save him. I slept perfectly that night. For the first time, I knew all the cards. I knew mine, and now I knew his. Sunday, I woke up, I made my coffee, I sat and watched the water. I didn't think about them at all. I thought about my day. At 4:00 p.m. I got ready. I didn't dress to impress. I didn't put on a fancy dress or expensive jewelry. That would be a costume. It would be an attempt to show them I was successful. I didn't need to show them anything. I put on my work uniform, black trousers, a simple silk shirt. My old, comfortable blazer. I put my hair back. I looked like myself. I looked like a woman who was going to a meeting. At 5:00 p.m. I picked up my bag and then I stopped. I went into my office. I opened the beautiful, modern closet. And on the top shelf all by itself was my old portfolio, the cheap black pleather, the ugly thick hand-sewn stitches that scarred the side. I took it down. I touched the scar. This was the night my father hung up on me. This was the night I decided to build my life alone. This was the proof. This was the one object in the world that told the entire truth. I put my keys and my wallet inside it along with a few other papers. I zipped it shut. This would be my purse. I drove my car, a nice new but not flashy electric sedan, from my waterfront condo to the suburbs. I drove back to the house I grew up in. As I got closer, I felt that old, familiar shrinking feeling. The air felt thicker. I felt like the girl who had to hide her report card so Elise wouldn't feel bad. I felt like the girl who had to be quiet at the dinner table. I parked on the street. I looked at the house. It was a nice house, but it looked so small. The lawn needed to be mowed. The paint was peeling a little on the trim. I took a deep breath. I was not the girl who lived here. I was a visitor. I was an investor. I got out of the car holding my stitched portfolio. I walked up the path. I rang the bell. And then I replied to my father's text from yesterday. I typed one sentence. "I'm here." My mother opened the door. Her face was a mess of practiced emotion. Her eyes were wide. Her hands were fluttering. "Harper?" "Oh my goodness, Harper, look at you." She pulled me into a hug. It was stiff. I was a block of wood. I did not hug her back. I just patted her on the shoulder. She pulled away, still holding my arms. "Honey, you look wonderful." "Just wonderful, so successful. We're just bursting with pride." "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "You said dinner was at 6. Yes, come in. Everyone is here." "Everyone was so excited to see you." I stepped inside. The house was exactly the same. It smelled the same, a mix of my mother's perfume, old carpet, and whatever was for dinner. Pot roast. It was always pot roast. The old Harper would have been comforted by the smell. The new Harper just felt tired. Elise was on the living room couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up. Her eyes did a quick, cold scan, head to toe. She was assessing me, the clothes, the bag, the hair. She was looking for a price tag. "Harper," she said with a tight little smile. "Big shot." "Elise," I said. Ryan was in my father's big armchair. He looked hungover. The flu he had on my graduation day seemed to be a recurring problem. "Hey, Harp," he mumbled. "That's a crazy apartment you got." "Hello, Ryan." Then my father, he walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was trying to look casual, like this was just any other Sunday. "Harper," he said. He nodded, not a smile, just a nod, the nod of a man who thinks he's in charge. "Glad you could make it." "You said it was important," I replied. The small talk was agony. It was the worst I had ever experienced. They didn't ask me one question about my life. They didn't ask, "How did you do it?" or "Was it hard?" or "Are you happy?" They only asked about the things. "Is it true it's 5,000 square feet?" my mother asked. "The article said you had marble floors. Is that cold in the winter? What's the view really like?" Elise asked, her voice sharp with jealousy. "How much is a place like that worth, really?" Ryan asked. I answered in short, simple sentences. "Yes. No, they're heated. It's the city. You read the article. I was a stranger. I was a celebrity they had read about in a magazine. I was not their daughter." We sat at the dinner table. The good china was out, the same plates I had hand-washed 1,000 times. My mother served the pot roast. My father poured the wine. He filled my glass without asking. I just looked at it. "So," my father said, cutting into his meat, "you've been busy." "Yes," I said. "That place on the water," he said, shaking his head. "That was a lucky find, a real lucky find. You know, I looked at that building 10 years ago. The numbers just didn't work." I took a bite of pot roast. It was dry. "The numbers worked for me," I said. "Yes, well," he said, irritated. "You had new money. You could take a risk. When you've been in the business as long as I have, you learn to be more careful." I just nodded. I let him talk. This was the script. I knew it. Step 1, minimize my achievement. Call it luck, call it new money, make it seem like I was a child who had stumbled into a winning lottery ticket. Elise chimed in. "I just can't believe you didn't tell us, Harper. I mean, we are your family. We had to find out from a magazine. It was embarrassing." "I'm sorry you were embarrassed, Elise," I said. My mother wrung her hands. We missed you, honey. It was so hard, you just disappearing." "Did you?" I asked. I didn't say it with anger. I said it with genuine curiosity. "It took 8 months and a magazine article for you to send a text. It didn't seem that hard." The table went silent. My father put his fork down. Clink, here it was. The mask was coming off. "All right," he said. He folded his hands on the table. Enough, Harper, you're right, we're proud, you did a good job, you've built something. He was trying to praise me, but his voice was tight. It pained him to say it. And now, he continued, you have an opportunity, a real one. You've been playing in the minor leagues, Harper. That Penthouse was a great little home run, but I'm talking about the major leagues. He leaned forward. His eyes were shining. I have a project, he said. The Evans Legacy Project. It's a full-block redevelopment, retail, residential, a park. It's going to change the face of that whole neighborhood. It's $100 million vision. He was looking at me, but he was talking to himself. It's a legacy, Harper, for this family, for all of us. We need capital, Ryan blurted out. My father shot him a dirty look. We are securing our final round of funding, and I'm offering you a chance to be a part of it. You're new to this industry, Harper, Elise added, her voice suddenly smooth, like she was on my side. You don't have the connections. You don't understand scale. This is your chance to be part of something big, something real. There it was, the pitch. We need capital. You're new to this industry. This is your chance. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to control my money. They wanted to absorb my success into his project. I would be the silent partner, the checkbook. I would be the $600 bakery savings girl all over again. I looked at them. My father expectant. My mother anxious, Elise jealous, Ryan greedy. They had not mentioned my graduation once. They had not apologized. They had not offered a single word of warmth. It was just expectation. I let the silence hang in the air. I let them squirm. Finally, I put my own fork down. I took a sip of water. Dad, I said, you're right. It's an impressive plan. He smiled. He was winning. I reached down to the floor, to the bag I had brought. I pulled out my old, ugly black portfolio, the one with the thick, clumsy stitches. I placed it on the dinner table. Thud. The room went completely silent. They all stared at it. It was a foreign object. It was a piece of trash on my mother's good china. My father's smile faded. He looked confused. What is that? This, I said, is where I keep my important discussions. The room froze. I unzipped the portfolio. The sound was loud in the quiet room. They were all staring at it. My father looked annoyed. My mother looked nervous. This was not part of the plan. You remember this, Dad? I asked, my voice very calm. I ran my finger along the ugly, thick black stitches. I bought this portfolio for my first internship. The one you said was a waste of time, and one night I called you. I was failing. I was cold and I was alone, and I told you I didn't think I could make it. My father's face was a stone. Harper, what is the point of this? The point, I said, is that you told me real estate was for men. You told me my dream wasn't practical, and then you hung up on me. That same night, this portfolio ripped open, and I sat on my dirty floor and I sewed it shut by hand with a hotel sewing kit. I looked at my mother. I baked cakes and Elise got the credit. I looked at my father. I gave you my savings and you went on vacation. I looked at all of them. I graduated summa cum laude and you sat in a hotel room sick. We said we were sorry about that, my mother whispered, her eyes filling with tears. No, I said, my voice still quiet but hard. You said Ryan was sick, you said the car broke down, you lied, you have never not once said you were sorry, you just hoped I would forget. I looked back at my father. You taught me a very important lesson that night you hung up on me. You taught me to never, ever depend on you. You taught me to do my own research. You taught me to be smarter, to be faster, and to be tougher. You're right, Dad. You taught me all about real estate. I pulled a thick stack of papers from the portfolio. Your Evans Legacy Project, I said. It's a good idea, a little ambitious for your capital, a little desperate, but the idea itself is solid. Except for one very big, very real problem. I slid the top document across the table. It was a deed. My father picked it up. His hands were shaking just a little. He read it. His face went from red to white. He looked like he couldn't breathe. The Westlake Plaza, he stammered. You bought the Westlake Plaza 4 months ago, I said. Elise's jaw dropped. Ryan just said, what? What is that? The Westlake Plaza, Ryan, I said, is the anchor property. It's the entire southern half of the block Dad wants to redevelop. It's the linchpin. It's the one piece of land without which the entire project collapses. My father was shaking his head, staring at the paper. But we were in negotiations. We had an offer in. How? You had an offer in, I corrected him. I had a check. I closed in cash, no contingencies. I didn't buy it to stop you, Dad. I didn't even know about your legacy project. I bought it because it was a smart investment, because unlike you, I don't over-leverage, I do my research, and I close my own deals." Ryan finally understood. Holy, she did it. She did it to us. "No, Ryan," I said, turning to him. "I did it for me, for my company. You are the ones who are making this personal. You called me here to ask for my money. You didn't call me here to celebrate." I stood up, I looked at the four of them, my family. "I sat here," I said, my voice finally, after all these years, breaking through the silence. "I sat here and I waited. I waited for one of you to say, 'Harper, how was your graduation?' I waited for one of you to say, 'We're so sorry we missed it.' I waited for one of you to say, 'Congratulations, you worked so hard.'" I looked at my mother, who was openly crying now. I looked at Elise, who was just staring at her empty plate, her face pale. "You never did," I said. "You just talked about my marble floors, you talked about how I was lucky, and then you asked me for money." I put the papers back in my portfolio. "A family shows up, Dad," I said, my voice dropping. "A family calls. A family protects each other. You skipped my graduation, you skipped my entire life, you skipped the biosphere and the bakery money and the blue ribbon and the night I was freezing and you hung up on me." I zipped the portfolio shut. "You skipped all of it, but you didn't skip the headlines, you didn't skip the $5 million. My father, he just deflated. The bluster, the anger, the power, it all drained out of him. He looked small, he looked old. He just stared at the table. He was a failed businessman and he knew it." Ryan cursed. You can't do this, you're a bitch." Elise, the brilliant one, didn't say a word, she just stared at her plate. She had been outplayed and she knew it. My mother looked at me, her face a ruin. "Harper, please don't do this. We're your family." "You're right," I said. I picked up my portfolio. "You are, and this is just business. You taught me that. Real estate is for sharks, right, Dad?" I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run, I walked. I heard my mother call my name once. "Harper," I didn't stop. I walked out the front door and closed it quietly behind me. The dinner ended in silence. I stood on the front porch for a full minute. The night air was cool. It felt good on my face. I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood I grew up in, a dog barking, a car driving by. Inside the house there was only silence. No one was yelling, no one ran after me. The door stayed closed. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything. I felt light. I felt a quiet I had never felt before. The knot that had been in my stomach since I was 10 years old, the "please notice me, please be proud of me" knot was just gone. I had walked in there as their daughter, their sister, their wallet. I was walking out as just Harper. I walked down the path to my car. I got in. I sat in the darkness on the quiet suburban street. I looked at the house in my rearview mirror. It was just a building, a house of wood and paint. The family I had been trying to win over all my life wasn't in there. That family had never existed. The people in that house were just people. Strangers, really? Strangers I happened to share blood with. My phone buzzed in my lap. I looked down. It was my mother, a new text message. "We didn't know how to make things right. Please don't give up on us." I read the text. "We didn't know how to make things right?" A small, sad smile touched my lips. It was such a perfect lie. How do you make things right? You say, "I'm sorry," you buy a plane ticket, you show up, you call, you send a card. You don't wait until your daughter is on the cover of a magazine and then ask her for money. They knew how, they just didn't want to. "Please don't give up on us." That was the old line. That was the guilt. That was the "who will help me with Ryan?" That was the hook they had used to keep me bleeding for them for 25 years. "Please don't give up on us." I looked at the words. I felt a faint, distant sadness, not for me, for her. For my mother, who was still trapped in that house with him, who was still enabling him, who was still begging the wrong person for a bailout. I turned the phone over face down in the cup holder. No reply, no fight, no anger. No explanation. The silence was my answer. My silence was for me this time. It wasn't a punishment, it was a boundary, it was peace. I started the car, the engine was almost silent. I pulled away from the curb and I didn't look back. I drove out of the suburbs. I left the small, dark streets and got on the freeway. I headed downtown. I headed toward the water. With every mile I felt that shrinking feeling fade. I felt myself expand back to my real size. I turned on the radio. A quiet, classical song was playing. I was no longer Harper the daughter. I was no longer Harper the sister. I was no longer Harper the gap filler. I was just Harper. I pulled into my building. The night doorman, a kind man named James, smiled at me. "Good evening, Miss Evans, a little late tonight." "Good evening, James," I said, "just a long dinner." "Welcome home," he said. I stepped into the private elevator. It opened directly into my penthouse. I walked into the vast, dark space. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The entire city of Seattle was glittering in front of me. The lights of the buildings, the ferries on the water, the Space Needle. It was a sea of light, my view, my home. I walked to the kitchen. The huge white marble island was cool under my hands. I set down the black portfolio. The light from the city windows hit the marble and reflected up. The old, cheap, ugly portfolio sat right in the middle of all that wealth. The scarred, stitched side was glowing. It was the foundation. It was the thing that had built all of this. It was a reminder of the night I chose to save myself because no one else was going to. I stood there for a long time just looking at it. The silence of the penthouse was huge. It wasn't the lonely, cold silence of my first apartment. It wasn't the angry, suffocating silence of the dinner table I had just left. It was freedom. It was the sound of my life finally, completely belonging to me. I was home. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself in the silence someone left behind, tell me where you're listening from. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this.